So Song has been having technical difficulties this entire time. She switched to her phone, so there's going to be an audio change. So Song, you were saying when we were talking about the, gender inclusive bippity boppity boop like makeover experience, you were saying this is normal, and then you switched to your phone because we wanted to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, it's not like I'm part of two women talking or anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I think, the idea of boys wearing dresses or painting their nails, I think it's perfectly normal. Just like, even I had a phase where I wanted to be a knight for a while and I didn't wear dresses because I just wanted to wear pants. I don't think that necessarily says something about anyone's gender identity. I think it's an experiment in figuring out what you like. And I do kind of wish kids could do that without people jumping to, oh, they're transgender. Let's take them to a doctor.
Yeah, there's that
And
extended sequence in the Robin Hood movie where Robin
the
Hood and Little
drag
John dress
sequence.
in drag, and yeah, Little John's boobs are the size of most people's heads. And it just shows, and that used to be the funny animal thing, right? Like a guy ending up in
Hmm.
a dress for a brief moment, and we've confused performance and costume with identity. And again, that's what I'm talking
Yeah.
about Disney being so subversive because they have to get past the parents.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead, Derwin. Sorry.
Yeah, and I'm with you, Song, and I'm with you, Leanna, that oftentimes our society confuses costuming and cosplaying for the adults with gender identity. It's as I say to people, it's just a costume. That person
Mhm.
dressed as Joker really isn't a psychotic maniac, right? That person dressed as Captain America might not actually be as nice as you think out of costume, right? And just because you dress in the opposite gender doesn't mean you're trans. But look at where the Disney parks are situated,
Yes.
right? And I think it's going to be a hard sell to have boys wear, dressing up as Cinderella at Big Bibbidi Bobbidi Boop in
Bippity
Disney.
bobbity boutique.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique. Given that I've lost count of the number of times I've lined up to go through the turnstile to one of the Disney parks, and I've seen people behind and in front of me wearing Jesus t-shirts. I mean that's the geographic area those
Yeah.
parks are in.
Yeah, I heard a scientist at the animal kingdom, you take that little tram up to the research center, getting into it with somebody about evolution.
Yeah.
And the guy was getting up in his face. It's like, no, we're a science facility. We subscribe to the theory of evolution here. There was no intent to pull the customer is always right on that one. And I gave them real credit for that. I mean, there is a line, and I think Disney is starting to find its feet on this one. I don't think they've really got the messaging down yet regarding, okay, we're only going to accommodate people's discomfort who are behind the times so far.
Hmm.
I think they're a little too combative, but I do think, Derwin, you were saying before that if the company wants to memory hole Song of the South, that absolutely has that right, which I think is interesting that one, they're just, nope, too nuclear, because, I mean, that makes sense as well, because one of the biggest rising segments in the US is the Black and Latino middle classes. So, like you said, that's not woke, that's a business decision. And so if they
Yeah.
want a memory hole Song of the South, they absolutely can. If they want to say, we're not interested in your racism, racist, that is also their prerogative as a company.
But I mean,
And
part of the thing is Song of the South has never had a complete release.
no,
Aside from maybe when it first went to theaters, it's never had a VHS release. It's never had a DVD or a streaming release. They've been doing this pretty much since it came out when they realized it didn't go over well. So it's like, what's the point in looking surprised? This whole movie has been, it's almost a litmus test of
yeah, well, it's
society.
the people who didn't like it then weren't the people who didn't like it now.
True.
For a lot of, I mean, that movie, and this is the thing, when you subvert things when you subvert a trope like the princess. Not
Hmm.
everybody's going to get it. Not everybody's going to understand it. And some people are going to be offended. And
Well, I mean,
that's the risk you take.
I've talked about how much it's like. It's not that I have a problem with the warrior princess. I'm just tired of the warrior princess because
It's also harder to get the songs in. I mean, the one thing I do think Brave suffered from was that the songs were background to action
yeah,
sequences. I mean, that one
yeah,
song, I forget the name of it now, where she's riding and the waterfall
touch
and
the
the horse.
sky.
Touch the Sky. That's right. Beautiful
Yeah,
song. I
yeah,
do
but
think that it would have been better had she been singing it.
Yeah.
yeah,
But
but aside from Noble Maiden Fair, all the songs are non-diegetic.
Yeah.
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 But yeah, the Disney princess as warrior princess, is that trend going to continue? Is there a Disney princess movie on the horizon that isn't a sequel at the moment? I don't
I
think there is.
I mean,
No.
Disney right now is going through another crisis, and they'll be fine because they always
Oh yeah.
are.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah. It's like the big parks crisis of the early 2000s, where everyone thought the Disney park was going to go out of business. As I mentioned, it didn't go out of business.
and
Oh,
I
oh God, no. They've launched like two new cruise ships in the past 5 years. They're building an entire new location
yeah.
at another island in the Bahamas.
Yeah, yeah.
They've just pretty much been approved for a multi-billion-dollar expansion in California.
Although as an accountant, I keep on saying beware of expansions,
Yes.
um, because oftentimes companies expand on debt, and when they can't recoup the debt, the money they spent, that's when you get in trouble.
Well,
Uh,
and let's face it, these expansions started to be planned 10 years ago.
right.
The
Oh yeah.
biggest issue that Disney Florida is going to have, the reason they're probably expanding outside of Florida is the ongoing fight with the state government.
Oh
Thanks,
yeah.
Ron
And
DeSantis.
yeah, and I do wonder if that's part of why they're doing such a large expansion in California. Because I mean,
I
the
think
idea
so.
of yeah, they're talking about adding like 3 or 4 new lands.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's interesting in California, what's interesting about the Florida situation was that those two municipalities, Lake Buena Vista and what was the other one? Something
Reedy Creek, Orange. No, it's
Reedy
there was
Creek.
Reedy Creek.
Ra-
Yeah,
yeah,
Mm.
Rady Creek. Is it called Rady Creek?
Reedy
Reedy
Creek.
Creek.
Reedy.
Right, that's right. Reedy
Yeah.
Creek and Lake Buena Vista and the pseudo government, the improvement area. It
Yeah.
had a name. I forgot the name off the top of my head. They were deliberately set up for certain governance issues in the 1970s because the local municipal government didn't feel it had enough money
Yep.
to fund all these public services like wastewater management and road repair and so on. So Disney said, "Well, let us run our own municipalities. We'll tax ourselves, and we'll use the taxes that go to the municipalities we control to fund the wastewater management, the environmental assessments,
Hmm.
and so on." Right? But there was a certain advantage to that in that
Hmm.
they could do their own zoning
Yep.
and
Yeah.
zoning, as we know from any city, zoning is a complicated issue. But with Disney, with its own employees basically on the city councils of these two municipalities and the pseudo municipality, uh, they could pretty well issue the zoning rights to create a volcano or a new
Yep.
castle or anything. Now they can't in Florida. They have to go through zoning with a DeSantis controlled
I'm
municipal
still so
authority.
mad about that.
Yeah, but how does it work in California, where they're still, I believe in California they do not have a Disney controlled municipal government there. They're still under Orange County and possibly the city of Anaheim. So they still will have to go to someone else's municipal council for the zoning, for the expansion.
Hmm.
I think though that because it's near Hollywood, a lot of weird stuff goes on there. So I mean, Is it the deal they had in Florida? No, because I mean, Epcot was originally supposed to be a city, right? It was supposed to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
a place where people lived, and I mean, God, talk about woke. I hate that we've all adopted woke as a shorthand. I don't even agree with that use of the word. I don't like that it's moved away from African American vernacular English, but we're all kind of stuck with it now. And that's one of
Yeah,
those that's one of those examples, right? Like, oh, I don't want to be forced to say things, and that's the right forcing us to all use this woke term because they've just made it such a point of contention that we're all forced to use it to talk about it.
Well, I remember the name of the town, Bay Lake. Bay Lake is the
Bay
other.
Lake, okay.
Yeah, Bay Lake. Yeah, population 46 or something. All of them Disney employees. But I think what you're hinting at is that the city councils in Orange County and Anaheim are probably going to be a lot more cooperative than the councilors installed by DeSantis in the
Oh, they
business
oh
improvement
yeah.
district.
they want the money. It's a way to bring in revenue to a state government. California desperately needs that because everything's based on propositions. And it's a way to bring in money in something other than a sales tax or a property tax. I don't know what, well, we all know what DeSantis was thinking, make a lot of noise to ratchet up your name ID. It didn't work in terms of presidential aspirations, but
Yeah.
that was raw politics. And I mean, ironically, that's what Disney used to rail about with the bean counters, right? If I had a nickel for every wannabe kind of arrogant entertainment person that quoted Walt Disney on bean counters, I'd need my own bean counter. But it that is a fundamentally misunderstood part of his legacy. And I do wonder what Walt would think about things now. We know what Abigail Disney thinks. She's been very vocal, but you know, Disney was notoriously kind of casually anti-Semitic. He wouldn't treat someone poorly if they were right in front of him, but he had thoughts about Jews. I wonder what he would think now, how much his viewpoints change, because you do see, especially in those early Disney princess films, of okay, this is the way things are, this is the role of women, but what if it could be more? He was a dreamer, and I do think that overpowered his, how do I put this, his flaws as a human. Like his ambition and his dreams overpowered the fact that he was very much a white man of the time. Derwin, what do you think about that? And then we'll go to song.
Oh, yeah. Well, companies evolve, and the company's evolved past death of its owner or its
Right.
founder, right? So, when Disney around, maybe he wouldn't have had warrior princesses coming from, say, Asia or Southeast Asia.
Yeah, who was that? Bob Iger that pushed
Yeah.
all that stuff through? Okay.
Yeah, maybe he wouldn't have. But you see this in a lot of entertainment companies. They evolve. Look at DC Comics from the 1930s and compare that to the cast of characters they have now, for example. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's much more diverse than it was back then. And so companies do evolve. Um, Now, as to whether uh, this is Walt's vision or whether what would Walt Disney have thought, that's probably irrelevant to the current owners of the Walt Disney Company, being the shareholders and the board of directors and so on.
They
Yeah, they want to make money now.
I know it features they do care very, very much about his legacy. I
Mhm.
mean, John Lasseter was a real, Dumbo in the room for things, but I know that that's why they fight to get Oswald back and all that stuff. Disney is a company obsessed with legacy, but
Yeah,
I mean, I think you're right that the minute it doesn't make the money, they don't care anymore.
yeah, but there's legacy and there's also, uh, for lack of a better term, legacy plus modernization.
Hmm.
You look at the UK monarchy, for example, and there's another institution obsessed with legacy and tradition. But you notice that the current king included clergy of different religions in his
Hmm.
coronation. He actually had Black and other minority groups participating in the coronation. It was definitely not like his mother's coronation. And you do see an increasing number of people from the diverse ethnic groups of the old British Empire getting knighted or getting life peerages. Those are the titles of nobility that don't get
Hmm.
inherited, right? And the Brits don't even
Hmm.
give hereditary peerages to white people anymore, right? All the new titles of nobility, practically almost all of them are life peerages. So you do see um, in institutions that are obsessed with tradition and heritage, also a combination of modernity as well. It's not a zero-sum game. So I'm bringing, yes, they can bring back Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and yes, you can still have what is essentially a very white uh, mid-American version of the United States in Main Street, USA. But Disney can still has room for a diverse set of warrior princesses.
Yeah, I mean, Song, what do you think about if Walt Disney were alive today? What would he think about the goings on?
I don't think he would like how the company is being run. Um, I think he would see the price of park admission and throw a fit. But
True.
um,
Okay.
But he was also not afraid of adaptation. So the
No.
don't change
no,
it thing, I mean the battle over Mary Poppins was so notorious they made a movie about it.
Yeah.
yeah, I I don't think he would like all the live action remakes because, like I said,
Yeah.
he's someone who he wanted to do new and different things, and he always wanted to experiment. And like I said, that's why we had the 30-year gap between Cinderella and Ariel because he was just like, no, I'm bored with fairy tale princesses. Let's do something else. And so I don't think he would like all the remakes and sequels that are being pushed out.
Yeah. But it's interesting. I mean, does what Walt Disney would think today is, like I said, probably highly irrelevant.
It's speculative, it's fun, but yeah,
Yeah,
not very
yeah,
meaningful.
yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
asking, would Charles the Third, does Charles the Third really bother to think what would George the Third think about the way the UK is run today? Probably not.
Well,
Didn't
that's
George the
that's
Third suck?
yeah, well that's the other interesting thing is that the country most obsessed with monarchy through princesses. I mean, let's face it, pageant culture in the US is very much My Little Princess and debutantes
Hmm.
and, the explosion in quinceanera parties and things like that. It's all some nobility proxy. And yet this is taking hold in a country that, historically, rather famously threw off no threw off the monarchy.
Yeah,
And meanwhile, over in the UK, anti-monarchism might be at an all-time high. Derwin, you're the sort of real world cultural expert. What do you think's going on there?
well, it is interesting because it's always been my take on American history that the United States did not fight, the Americans did not fight the revolution for liberty, justice, freedom for all. I mean, they were slave owners. They fought it because they didn't want to pay taxes to the British.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
what's interesting is that I meet a lot of I'm involved in heraldry, and I'm also I'd like to consider myself an expert on orders of knighthood and things like that, right? I'm actually in one, the order of the most venerable order of St. John, not to the level of a knight, but it is an order of knighthood that the monarchy in Canada, Australia, and the UK and the other Commonwealth countries award to persons who've served in St. John ambulance, right? And I've noticed in these circles that we often attract Americans who are obsessed with getting a British knighthood, or they're obsessed with getting a title of nobility from anywhere, even an exiled European monarch like the late Peter II of Yugoslavia, who eventually went to Chicago, Illinois, right? And you see this right from the end of the American Revolution. Uh, the treaty was signed in 1782, and in 1783, a group of American and French military officers formed the Society of the Cincinnati, which was the first of the American hereditary societies.
Mm-hmm.
They've rebranded themselves as lineage groups and lineage societies, but
Okay.
yeah, but they're a hereditary society. So membership in the Society of Cincinnati were to officers who had fought on the winning side of the American Revolution and to their firstborn sons, and it goes like primogeniture, right? So today the members of the Society of Cincinnati are descendants of these officers from the American Revolution. Not only that, they began to develop badges and insignia and medals that resembled those of the European nobility, right? The first
So,
American medals come from these societies, right? And
so I think that speaks to the very human desire to be included, to feel like we're
Mm.
part of a group.
well,
And it's like,
more than that, it's part of an exclusive group.
well, yes, it's we want to be involved in a group, but then the other parts of human nature take hold, and it's like, okay, we want to make it prestigious. We want to block other people out. We
That's why I
want
don't get
something
it.
that makes
Okay.
us, yeah, that
Yeah,
makes us feel special.
yeah, but
Something.
it's an especially American um, uh, cultural uh,
Mhm.
tradition, because you don't see these hereditary societies to the same extent in Canada or Australia, for example. In Canada,
No,
we've
Mhm.
just got one. Right?
we're all offshoots of American things that
Well,
we do for fun. Yeah.
we've only got one in Canada, which is the United Empire Loyalists, and
Okay.
they don't have sashes and badges and medals. They have lapel pins and ties. That's it. And the other big difference between the United Empire Loyalists and the over 300 hereditary societies that exist in the United States is that from the beginning, the United Empire Loyalists was open to people who were not white. They acknowledged that there were indigenous tribes that fought on the British side. They also have always had membership open to the blacks who served on the British side, especially the ones in Nova Scotia.
Mm-hmm.
However, American hereditary societies are typically almost all white in membership, and like there's over 300 of them in
Wow.
an organization called the Hereditary Society Community of the United States. Right now, I looked through the list, and there's probably more than I counted, but I counted only two out of the 300 that were explicitly open to minorities. One called Sons and Daughters of the United States Middle Passage, which is for descendants of slaves,
Okay.
and the other one called Order of Descendants of Native Americans and Friends. So the others, and you've probably heard their names before: Daughters of the American Revolution, Sons of the American Revolution, Daughters of the Alamo, um, First Families of Connecticut, uh, uh, Grand Army of the Republic, and so on. These are all hereditary societies for people who are descended from certain groups of white people who did something in the 19th century or earlier, right?
Okay.
My joke to a member of one of these societies is the United States is the only country in the world where you can get a medal just for being descended from white people.
Now, Song, you live in the US, and I mean, you were raised in some pretty conservative parts of the US. Does this track with what you observed growing up?
I'm from poor parts of the US. I did not know anything about this.
Oh,
Oh,
well, yeah,
interesting. Okay.
yeah. Well, let me emphasize that these
So this
hereditary
this is
societies.
connected to class. This is a
Oh,
wealth
Oh
thing.
yeah.
oh,
Ah, okay.
definitely connected to class. I mean the or people who've risen up the social ladder.
Because I remember going to a wedding in Arkansas and they said, we're a church family, but we're not a rich church family. So we have to do certain things because this is the way it's done but not others. It was practically like a royal ritual thing. All the stuff that Lewis Carroll raged against in Alice in Wonderland of just certain things are done and certain things are not done. It was fascinating. I've never experienced anything like that.
It gets much more royal, like at the Society of Cincinnati or Daughters of the American Revolution.
Right.
They pride themselves. In fact, they're obsessed with holding these white tie and black tie balls where everyone dresses in their best clothes and tuxedos, everything, and sashes and the medals, right?
But here's an interesting thing, because you just reminded me. So with the explosion of fantasy romance in particular as a genre, there's a rising trend of fantasy balls
Yes.
across the US. And we're seeing them with A Court of Thorns and Roses.
They're coming up here too.
Yeah. And the Labyrinth of Jareth has been happening in LA for
I've been
years.
to that. I have been to that. Yeah.
Now, this is interesting because this actually seems related to the American obsession with hereditary societies because
that's that's what I'm bringing up is it's like it because like I've always and I can only speak to my own experience. It's like I want to go to a ball. I want to wear a ball gown. I want to have a lovely glowing night. It's like the Rodgers and Hammerstein Cinderella, a lovely night, a finer night you'll never see. So obviously, these fantasy balls have obviously got my attention.
Oh yeah, and up here we had a Bridgerton event.
Yeah, Bridgerton is another big one, and even if they're not calling it Bridgerton, it's like, oh, here's our Regency experience.
Yeah,
and so it's like, I don't know if it's in other countries, but at least in America, there is that desire to dress up.
And it's interesting because my associations with these events are completely different. I would rather die than go to one of these things. I go to them, but it's the 3 weeks after where I found out who called me fat and who called me old and who called me haggard and who cut up my shoes and who said my hair was shit. And it's like, I do this out of obligation. This is not my idea of a good time.
Wait, which ball is this?
Oh, anything. I mean, God, people were making fun of my appearance after the book launch and I only wore a dress because it was your event and it matched the cake. I mean, this is my experience with these grand balls. And Song, I know this is part of it because I've read Calidus Chronicles. So why do you enjoy it?
I don't know. I've never got to go to one.
It's part of the American obsession with royalty and monarchy, which isn't exclusive to Americans, but Americans have institutionalized it via their hereditary societies. I mean,
I think it's also because we don't have it. And so when you just look at the fairy tales and, it's like in one of the Conan the Barbarian stories where, there's a bard who's going around singing about the king who was just killed a few years ago.
Yeah.
He's managed to run a propaganda campaign to make people miss the king that stole their daughters for his seraglio and murdered their sons just to get his way. And so it's like it's easy to fantasize about something when it's not directly in your face. Right. But a side note I want to add, and I don't know if this is common at all the fantasy balls, but one that I've been following because it's one I want to go to. One of the things they're offering is a dance with a fairy prince. And it just reminds me, it's for women who are coming who are single. And it's just an opportunity to dance. It's basically the Japanese host club.
That makes absolute sense to me.
Okay, that makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah. They're going to have a set of relatively attractive men who are all just going to play a role, and you're going to get like one dance with them or something. And I'm like, God, I get it, but that's also kind of pathetic.
Well,
it's transactional.
It's transactional, but this is fulfilling a sort of need that for commoners now. It's when I
Oh
say
yeah.
commoners,
Yeah.
when I say commoners, I'm talking in the class sense as opposed to the legal sense.
Oh
Um,
no, I
yeah,
totally get it.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
No, that makes sense to me because it's that I want to know what it's validation,
yeah,
right? It's
Hmm.
just the experience of someone pretty cool not treating you like you're vile and disgusting and you get it away. I do think it's the same uh it is the same human need as waifus or sex workers for men. It's
Yeah.
OnlyFans for women.
yeah.
Yeah.
What's interesting though is that, and I'm going to bring this back to, I'm going to tie all of this into Disney. Believe it or not, I can actually tie this all into
Nice.
Disney. Is that these hereditary societies and these fantasy balls seem to fulfill a need, especially amongst Americans, to feel like they're royalty, despite the fact that the United States is supposed to be an egalitarian republic with no social class. But it's interesting who opposed these hereditary societies amongst the white ruling class. Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin, both men thought that these hereditary societies were an
Hmm.
attempt to create a noble class in the United States. Um, although they could have been jealous because neither one of them had been in the military during the American Revolution. Um,
Mm.
George
Hmm.
Washington was invited to join the Society of Cincinnati, but he balked after the more Republican members of Congress convinced him not to. And a lot of them, a lot of them have a reputation for racism, which is slowly easing off now. Daughters of the American Revolution in the 1920s and 30s was quite explicit that one of its roles was to preserve the white privilege and white rule over the United States over the immigrants. And
Wow.
right, and if you look at when these societies sprang up, a lot of them sprang up in the mid to late 19th century as the United States was getting a lot of immigrants from Eastern Europe and Italy and places considered undesirable. Right? And although none of them will today say that they're only for white people, uh,
Like,
they, yeah, none of them will explicitly say that anymore. But the membership criteria are often geared to things like, for example, the free settlers who entered a state or territory before a certain date. Of course, how many Black people were free, right?
Yeah.
Or the settlers had to have been Americans before they came in. That eliminates a lot of the descendants of the Chinese railway workers who were not American
Yeah.
citizens, right? So they have these institutional roadblocks still built in. Having said that, um, don't get me wrong. Um, a lot of the people who are members of these societies are simply there because they're interested in heraldry,
Hmm.
genealogy, and history. They're not. I'm not going to say that they're all racist. I know a few who are racist, but I know a lot who are also
Yeah.
not racist.
Yeah.
And some do have a sense of humor. Like there's a hereditary society called Son of a Witch, which is for descendants of witches who are smart or lucky enough not to go to Salem, Massachusetts.
Yeah. I just
Right?
saw a thing for that today on Instagram.
Oh, yeah, a friend of ours is a member of Son of a Witch, right? But
Oh, okay.
but
Okay.
but
So
but
I
I'm going to
want,
tie this back to Disney,
yeah,
okay?
I have a question actually, but go ahead, finish your point.
Okay, so I'm going to tie this back to Disney. So since the end of the American Revolution, Americans have always wanted a form of nobility or a form of royalty, and it's not well known that some members of Congress even were toying with the idea of establishing a monarchy with George Washington as the first king. He refused the crown.
Hmm.
Um, and there was even a period in the late 19th century when wealthy American families were marrying off their daughters to British nobility, right?
the
Because they wanted,
$1 princesses.
yeah, yeah. So how does this tie into to Disney? All right. So um, obviously the popularity of the princess franchise, in my opinion, is partly due to the American obsession with wanting their own nobility. Also, if you visit that castle, every Disney park is a castle.
Yes.
Uh,
Mhm.
which is the one I just came back from, California, Anaheim. Look above the
The
arch.
Sleeping Beauty
There's
castle.
Yeah, yeah. Look above the arch. There's a coat of arms with three lions on it.
Yes.
Lion, right? And if you go visit the Walt Disney animation studios archives room in near Los Angeles.
In Burbank, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's a recreation or a reconstruction of Walt Disney's office. You see a picture of that same coat of arms, right? Disney claimed to have been descended from a French knight who came over to England with William the Conqueror.
Hmm.
Right now, I found no actual genealogical evidence of that, and like a lot of family histories,
Yeah.
it's something that got
Well,
passed down from generation to generation. You might actually not find the genealogical evidence for that, but it was important to Disney that he was descended from French nobility, right?
well, I mean, I don't know if this is something that has made its way outside of the US because of what a meme it was. But there was a time in the 90s, especially, where there were so many girls who'd be like, oh, well, I'm 1/16th Cherokee princess.
That
Like,
that got going in the 70s.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
And
always a princess too, right? It's
it's
never a
yeah,
Cherokee commoner.
it's a
no.
much bigger thing in the US. I mean, God, there was the whole Buffy St. Marie thing, but that seemed to just go away.
Oh
People were
God,
just like, oh, that's unfortunate. Let's move on. We don't want to talk about this. Whereas they're still dunking on that kid who plays Sokka in Avatar for being in the wrong tribe.
yeah. Well, in Canada, we call them pretendians, right?
Yeah.
But in the
Yeah.
US, and people become pretendians for various reasons. But what I noticed, like you song, is that a lot of American pretendians um, say they're, descended from some indigenous person. And there's
Well,
even,
I've been told I'm descended from Geronimo, but I have no record of that because I
but
don't know my
it's
father.
interesting. It
So
amongst Americans of the upper classes, and I know this person who legally changed her name to her first name to Princess. So we'd have to call her Princess,
Oh, Lord.
right? Right. It's not a
oh, why didn't
title.
I think of that?
Yeah, it's not a title. And
Ah!
she claims to be descended from the Plantagenet dynasty and so on. She's bought titles nobility from exiled European royalty,
Oh, Lord.
right, who are desperate for money and will just sell you a title of nobility and a knighthood, right? Although some people say she's jealous of you, because you got a real one from Queen Elizabeth, right?
See, that just strikes
But
me as somebody desperately trying to matter.
oh yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
she's a wealthy socialite in California, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
But
yeah, but
here's the interesting part. Like a lot of wealthy Americans, she's descended from an indigenous ancestor. She picked Pocahontas. And
Right.
even better, she's joined a so-called Cherokee nation, which is not recognized by the US government.
See, that's what the kid from Avatar: The Last Airbender was as well. And to me, it's like that's when I start going, this isn't a real, the Water Nation is not they're not Cree, they're not Ojibwe, they're not a real thing. Can we leave the kid alone? He didn't cast himself,
yeah.
and that's what I want to ask you guys, sort of almost getting into a lightning round thing, because commenters are going to like to have their opinions too. What I can't decide between two of the Disney princesses that are the most subversive. I'm going to talk for a bit to give you guys both time to think, because
Okay.
this is a challenging one. My tie between the two most subversive Disney princesses, subvert being defined as undermining the power and authority of a system or institution. So my two most subversive are Belle from Beauty and the Beast, and it's just because the whole thing about the story is she breaks the curse, and we're all so disappointed when we see what he looks like without the beast cursed. We all wanted him to go
Am I
back.
I'm really the only person in the world who prefers human Adam.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It was a bad curse. I kind of feel guilty about that. But he looks so cool as the beast, and he just looks so normal as a dude. And I
Yeah,
get,
but I'm not into monster fucker.
but I'm not either. I identify with monsters, and I know that's a whole thing, and I'm not going to judge. So that's the one. It's the fact that so many people, the big moment of, and it is a metaphor of him getting over himself, and I like that. But the
Hmm.
fact that she doesn't fix him, she just exists and she has boundaries, and so he grows because he cares about her, not because she had to train your monster. It's not that. It's just boundaries. Boundaries. Don't just jump at the first guy who pays you attention. The other one, though, is Cinderella, because of the whole fairy godmother thing and showing how much of, and that's why I love that it's the Bippity Boppity Boutique, because
Hmm.
glamour originates in the idea of a spell that tricks you. And I think
Hmm.
everybody should do the whole makeover and photo shoot thing once to see how much of it is hair and makeup and wardrobe and lighting and poses. And it really does make you rethink what beauty means and how we interact with it. And so the whole idea that this common girl could have a night where she gets a glam squad and just turns every head, uh, I do think that says something about the whole thing. And I think it's something that no side of the culture war wants to touch, which again is beauty is a performance. Don't expect
Hmm.
women to look that way all the time. You know, even the guys, the movie stars, the K-pop artists, all that stuff. They don't look that way all the time.
Well, I mean, I work in a waxing salon, and even the women who want to look that way, they don't always appreciate how much work it is. Because it's like, I get the waxers who get so frustrated because it's like, these people don't moisturize, they don't exfoliate, but they expect perfect results. And it's like, no,
Ooh.
you, there is a maintenance. If you want to do this, and if you want good results, you have to put in the work. And so a lot of people just do not comprehend how much work beauty is. Like when people tell me, oh, I wish I had the time to, I wish I could do my makeup like that every day. And it's like, I make a choice to put in the
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
And it's like, you clearly have chosen not to do that. And that's fine. But it's like, don't act like you don't have this option.
I
It,
yeah, yeah. It's
yeah, go on.
interesting.
So
It's
Derwin,
I,
what are your top two or three or most subversive Disney princess?
okay. I was going to comment that
Oh, go ahead, but then and
the
yeah.
people who probably uh, the people who probably know the best, that you just can't roll out of bed looking perfectly made up with
Mhm.
perfect hair and perfect makeup are probably fashion models and cosplayers.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Cosplayers especially, yeah. It's something I learned. Um, okay, so who do I think is subversive? I think possible. Okay, if I had to choose one, but I think you're asking me to choose two, but
One is fine. I just couldn't decide.
okay, if I had to choose one subversive Disney princess, I pick Mulan, right? And for these reasons. A, she's the Disney princess who plays around with gender presentation, right? Not necessarily gender identity, because she still
Right.
identifies as female underneath the costume, but she dresses like a male and foos a lot of people into thinking of it. A second, she's the first Disney princess to go into an occupation that's not traditional for women. She's in the military,
Okay.
right? And yeah, so those are the reasons that the gender presentation is very subversive, um, especially in Florida these days. And the military, not in real life there have been princesses in the military. For example, our late queen, and also
Yep.
the late queen in exile of Romania was also in the military. People didn't.
Doesn't Princess Anne have a rank, which is why she was part of Charles's honor guard?
Yep, she does.
Yeah.
Right, right. And
Okay.
and the oh, what's her name? She died several years ago. The exile princess of Queen of Romania, married to King Michael of Romania. She was actually serving in the French military during World War II.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not unusual for princesses in real life, especially some who got exiled, to be serving in the military. But Mulan was was definitely in a combat role. Okay, not only that, in the legend, well, not in the Disney movie, in the legend, she actually does rise up to the level of an officer or a general. So that's why I think she's possibly the most subversive of the lot.
And
All right.
even in the original Ballad of Fa Mulan, part of that story is she achieved that rank of general through using the lessons she was taught as a lady.
Yep.
And that it gave her a different viewpoint
Yeah, but
than the other soldiers.
yeah. So that's my selection for most subversive. But you know, this is a subjective question. I see your point about Cinderella being the you know, the common girl who is enabled to have a makeover and a night out and being
I
treated not
you're you're
driven.
predicting where I'm going with this. I'm curious what song's going to say because I think an argument could be made for every single one of them. But I'm curious about what song. What's
I
your
don't
top
I
subversion?
don't even know because, like you said, there's an argument to be made for all of them.
I was
In
sure
some
you were
ways,
going to say Tangled, Rapunzel.
I don't really consider Rapunzel subversive though. Like there's the whole thing with the frying pan. But like
Well,
if I'm
there's the whole relationship with what's how do you pronounce her name? Goeth.
Gothel,
Gothel.
Gothel,
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I thought that was a big swing.
I mean, in that sense, it is one of the best depictions of emotional abuse
Right.
I've ever seen. Like,
Yeah.
just there's a reason I watch that. I can't watch that movie too much because it hits close to home.
Yeah, but
You know?
I thought subverting the evil queen fairy godmother thing into almost more of a commentary. It's an affirmational depiction of sort of the princess in the tower instead of the aspirational, oh, one older lady will come along and save you from the bad older lady.
Yeah. No,
That's
instead
yeah.
it's gonna be a thief with identity issues.